Welcome. Hey, it's Dren, and today I'm going to talk about music in VR. So one of the reasons for doing this is one of the projects I worked on before, and I've talked about it here, I believe, is called Mescaform Hill, The Missing Five. It was at Tribeca Film Festival last year, and then it's been on the Oculus, or whatever they call it now, MetaQuest TV. I should know this. It was Oculus TV. Now I think it's MetaQuest TV. Anyway, it was an animation done all in VR, for VR, in a program called Quill, and made its debut at Tribeca last year, Mescaform Hill, The Missing Five. Bringing that up because the music that I had composed for this project is coming out, well, tomorrow, but by the time you see this, it will be today or hereafter. It's going to be called A Mescaform Hill Music Story, is what we're going to be calling it. It's going to be a different sort of soundtrack. It's going to not be a bunch of little cues, because the cues were so short in the project that it didn't feel right to kind of pad them and make them longer. So what I ended up doing was taking most of the cues and just kind of putting them in order of the whole program, of the whole story, and include some sound design and ambiences in between to try and glue the whole thing together as a full-on listening experience that's kind of like a story. So we decided to call it a Mescaform Hill Music Story. It's going to be 16 minutes long, and that should be available on Spotify and Apple Music and all the places you listen to these things. I wanted to let you know about that. And then also, in a previous video, I'll link it here probably, I had discussed revisions in composing for different work. And the project that I was speaking about in that video, I couldn't reveal it just quite yet, but now I can, as it premiered at the Venice Film Festival, the 80th Venice Film Festival last month. And it's called Perennials, and maybe we'll put a picture of it here. And Perennials was a really lovely VR animation, another one of these done in Quill, and I did all the sound design, all the music, and audio direction, implementation, everything on that particular project. And just a pleasure to work on. Really lovely animated piece, very unique animation in that. And that should be on that store that I mentioned, the MetaQuest TV or whatever. They're all free to watch, so it doesn't cost you anything as long as you have one of these. That should be out soon, as well as another one called Pepitos, the Beak Saga. And Pepitos was a piece that I also added some audio direction on and some sound design on. I didn't do any music for it, but I'd helped with that project for a good while. And that also premiered at the Venice Film Festival last month. And both of those should be in that store coming up here soon. So I'll put a picture of Pepitos over here. Those are coming. And along with that, I wanted to kind of discuss 5 things about music in VR. I figured we needed a snappy title. So 5 things you need to know about music in VR. All these things, these lists are like 5 things. So without getting clickbaity about it. So the first thing really is you look at this thing and the speakers are firing out of the sides of this plastic unit. So they're tiny little speakers that are encased in plastic and shooting out sound waves at your eardrums directly. So the chances of those things being able to produce low frequencies is slim and none. So you got to really watch in your arrangements of your music that you don't count on too much low end. It's not like film or TV where you can really just let it go and you don't have to worry too much about the playback system. Most people are going to be able to recreate those low frequencies. But with this, yes, people can plug in headphones to this. In my experience in working in VR, almost no one does it. It's already a pain in the butt to get these things on your head. You don't really want to put on another set of headphones over your ears. Some people do, but I just figure that I'm not going to count on that. So watch your low frequencies in your arrangements and your mixing. On this particular one, I try not to count on anything under 100 hertz. And this is very similar to when I was writing music for mobile games. I still do. I still write for mobile games. But you have to be careful about your low end because you have a tiny little speaker and a phone, and it's not going to reproduce low frequencies. Okay, I think I made that point. So here's number 2. Number 2 thing about music in VR, spatial awareness. Now, it might seem obvious, but kind of knowing what other sounds are going to be in the project at any given moment. If you know the story, if you know the narrative, if you're working with a sound designer, if you have a lot of dialogue in a particular moment, you need to know these things. Sure, we need to know that for film and TV too. And often when you're given video to work on music, you know what you see the dialogue. You can get all the dialogue, and you might hear some of the sound design, or at least roughed in sound design. So you kind of have an idea where things can happen. In VR, unless you're in the headset all the time or you made a 2D video of your VR project, it's hard to know exactly what's happening in your scenes. So the more information you have, I think the more equipped you can be to create music that will work in those moments. And yeah, it's important in film and TV too, but somehow it even feels more important in VR because you're so immersed in this experience. You know, we're not looking at a flat screen, we're inside of this whole thing. And in VR, you know, a lot of the environmental sounds, ambiences, VO, that will probably be more important in VO to help sell the environment rather than the music, especially because the music's non-diegetic. And that brings me to point number 3 of music in VR. Diegetic versus non-diegetic. This is becoming a really big subject in VR and in MR, mixed reality. So we've come to really expect non-diegetic music in the film and TV that we watch, right? It's in everything that we've ever watched forever. We expect music to just come out of nowhere and play for us to help guide the emotions of a particular piece of media that we're watching. When you're in VR, now there's another question about it. So if we're in VR taking a walk in the park and we hear non-diegetic music all of a sudden, it might strike us as being a little bit strange or take us out of the experience even a little bit. So we have to kind of think about what belongs in these VR experiences and what doesn't as far as music goes. Also in VR now that we've had quite a few games and a lot of viewing experiences in VR, I think that people are I think it's starting to tip a little bit towards the non-diegetic music. I think people are becoming more accepting of being in especially a game experience and hearing non-diegetic music, because that already feels very immersive. But if you're going to do an MR experience, which means mixed realities, put on your headset that you have pass-through, you can see what's happening in your living room or dining room, wherever you put this on. You have graphic overlays coming into your mixed reality field of view, and those are interacting with things in your kitchen or in your dining room. Things are landing on the table in front of you, and you see real-time kind of a mixed reality of things that only exist in the headset and things that exist in the physical world. Where does music fit in that? It seems to me that non-diegetic music isn't going to work too well in mixed reality. We have a project we're working on now that really involves putting things into your environment. But we tried it with non-diegetic music to start with, and it just never felt quite right. As soon as we turned off the music, it just immediately felt like it was working much better. So it's one of these things we're just still exploring and experimenting with. Point number 4 of music in VR. And believe me, this kind of drives me crazy. I've seen people make posts about how to compose for music in VR. And a lot of it is clickbaity. So I'm trying to make this not clickbaity. So number 4, mixing. I had done a previous video about mixing for VR. So I'm going to put it down here instead. So that link is all about taking advantage of Atmos tools and creating ambisonic or binaural mixes that you can use in your VR experience. The workflow that I laid out was mixing in Atmos, then rendering to binaural, and then using the binaural file in the project, which is what we did in Mescaform Hill and Perennials. And it will still stay headlocked, which means that if you move your head, the music won't change at all. But that kind of seems right to do, unless there's a diegetic reason for the music to change as you move your head. It doesn't really make sense. So we just leave it headlocked for now. But by mixing binaurally, or at least having a binaural mix to include in the project, a binaural mix has a way of kind of staying in the background a little bit better and letting the other elements of sound kind of be important in that VR environment. So that would be the ambience and the VO and the sound design. And the music, it's not a stereo mix. Stereo mixes tend to be up closer to your ears. If you've ever listened with earbuds and use your phone and switch back and forth between the stereo version and the Atmos version, you know, the Atmos version always feels like it's a little more ambient and environmental. And the same thing happens in VR with a binaural mix. So you're just kind of hearing it with a little bit more space, allowing the other elements to come in and be important. That's great in VR. So that's what a lot of us have been doing for these VR projects. Now we get to number 5 in our music for VR video. So number 5 is really that there's always room for experimentation. Everything I could say here right now, today, in September 2023, could be wrong in 3 months, depending on what comes out. Man, when that Apple Vision Pro comes out, everything could be wrong. I don't know what's going to happen when that comes out, but once we start seeing that and people start developing for it, I think we're going to see a lot of new ideas and experimentation happen. I think that's really exciting. As far as music experiments in VR, I did take one of my pieces from Terrace, this record over here, which I did mix in Atmos. And I took one of those mixes and I kind of made an ambisonic bed for it. And I created a bunch of mono point emitters of the same layers of music, different instruments and whatnot, and just kind of placed it all around in Quill. I just used Quill as just an audio tool to create this mix inside of VR. Now all I need is to get some friends of mine to help animate something to make it visually interesting. I think there's a lot of room for experimentation with tools like Quill as we get into audio in VR, and audio first in VR, because it's been so visual so far. In addition to the Apple Vision Pro, I think we're going to see a lot of new development around VR and MR, especially MR. So there you go, my thoughts on music in VR. Cool things could be coming, or it might just be just a bunch of dumb roller coaster sims. Who knows? Anyhow, again, a Mescaform Hill Music Story release out now, and then stay tuned for Perennials and Pepitos, which should be available on the MetaQuest TV app very soon. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.